I think the purpose of the my talk today and Arnold's is really to introduce you to the research that's just been commissioned, to actually make you aware that this is now ongoing, but as Sam said, to actually appeal to you for inputs into helping us move the research forward. I was going to start really reflecting back on what Melinda mentioned, and then we've heard it again about these two processes, about the SDG process and the Open Working Group and the UNFCCC processes. And I think one of the key things about this research is that it's not bringing processes together, but it's trying to bring together an analysis that looks at really the outcomes of those two processes and how potentially they interact. It also reflects back on something Andrew mentioned earlier about how do international agreements then impact at the national level. So again, I think you will see that within the research. And then how we can benefit and use existing evidence in adding value to that and perhaps moving forward from qualitative to quantitative analyses. So, for example, the NGO report we've just been introduced to. So that some very nice links there, that it's a sort of progression of many things that have been discussed today. Okay. So the project aims, overall, it's really to support negotiators under the COP process by providing additional evidence that can be tabled. And it's to consider the impacts on development under two scenarios, and those being the strong and weak climate change agreements for the 2015 development goals, so achievement of those goals. And the research is divided into two parts. First of all, there's a regional analysis, and that will look at three regions. So we have Sub-Saharan Africa, Asia, and Latin America and the Caribbean. And then there's a part B, which will build on that regional analysis, but then actually be looking at a country level at furthering and deepening the analysis. And those countries, we're still a little bit in discussion, but likely to be Uganda, Pakistan, and in fact, potentially the Caribbean within the LAC region. So we have representation there of an LDC, an MIC, and a SIDS context. So it's also looking at the differences there. The purpose is really to build on, not the purpose, but we're going to build on existing work. And I think that's also somewhere where we would welcome your input as to where the existing work currently lies and what best existing information we can draw on. It's clearly part of a much broader and wider piece of work. So the aim is not to duplicate, but to add value, for example, to the work that we've just been introduced to, the NGO report. And as I mentioned, it's trying to move from qualitative analysis to quantitative analysis where possible. Now, clearly, we don't feel that's achievable across all the SDGs, for example, but across a number of selected ones, and particularly perhaps drilling down at the country level, there might be quantitative analysis that we can bring to the table and that can then be used. There are a number of research questions that are really underpinned by our methodology itself, and Anil will introduce that shortly. But first of all, what are the projected impacts of climate change for the period 2015 to 2030, so the period of the SDGs? There is quite a body of information there already. There are lessons learned potentially from analysis of what's happened with the MDGs, etc. So we're drawing largely on existing literature for those aspects. What are the economic consequences of these impacts is then trying to take it to another level, really trying to take it away from the sort of biophysical impacts into the impacts on sectors, and then subsequently the impacts on the economic impacts. Thirdly, how will these impacts and consequences affect, and it's really affect progress towards achievement of the SDGs as an intermediate step. The two climate change agreements with the high ambition and low ambition, they will also be investigated to look at how they will also impact on the SDGs. And then those two strands effectively brought together into the final research question, which is how is a high ambition and a low ambition climate agreement likely to impact the achievement of the of the SDGs, and in particular in the 3 regions and 3 countries that we'll be investigating. It's certainly a very challenging task. What I would like to do is perhaps just introduce Anil and allow him to introduce the methodology that is proposed at the moment, and then call for basically some input from yourselves that may help us progress.